Okay, awesome. I'm Abby Jenkins. I'm the president and CEO of Gamida Cell. I'm excited to be here. This is my first ARM meeting on the Mesa. Even more excited because Gamida Cell was one of the 9 companies that was on the docket in 2023 to have a product approval, so woohoo. Please note, I will be making a number of forward-looking statements during this conversation. So, Gamida Cell, who are we? So Gamida Cell has been around since 1998, so for over 20 years we've been working to turn cells into powerful therapeutics. And we're excited to be at this juncture where we're transitioning from the promise of potentiating these cells and maximizing their intrinsic properties and translating that into being proven through our clinical development program and now approved in the US. So very excited. We have brought our first commercial product to market, AmiSurge. AmiSurge is a first in many ways. It's the first kind of pharmaceutical grade commercial stem cell transplant, allogeneic stem cell transplant. And that's an amazing testament to the work that the team has done. We have just launched our first product, so we have a US team of commercial and medical affairs professionals, and then we have our R&D and manufacturing colleagues in Israel. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge how challenging this week has been for our team. It's an amazing testament to that team's resilience and commitment to the purpose of Gamida Cell. Fortunately, all of our team members are accounted for and our manufacturing facility is operational. And these team members against the backdrop of a war, I can't even imagine trying to work under those conditions. They're committed to bringing these products forward because they know that AmiSurge and our development candidate, that these products may represent the only or last hope for a cure for these patients. So it's been a challenging and yet inspiring week for the team. So in addition, we are focused not only on launching AmiSurge ourselves, but we have a 2-pronged corporate strategy focused on the launch, but also on finding a partner. And if you were in the panel that was just before these presentations, certainly one of the challenges for this year has, for the last 2 years, has been the tumultuous fundraising landscape. And so we had to make some very difficult decisions. We had to launch AmiSurge with an incredibly lean launch team, the smallest launch team I've ever launched a product with. We had just 4 account directors and 4 MSLs and 4 payer directors, one of which is right there, from the payer team. But we had to launch just with an extremely lean footprint, and so we focused on just 2 key performance indicators or metrics for launch: the number of transplant centers we could onboard and market access. Those were our critical success factors. From a transplant center perspective, we set the goal with our lean launch team at 15 transplant centers, and for market access, we set a goal of 70% of commercial lives covered by the end of the year. So I'm gonna keep you guessing on exactly how we're doing against those metrics. I will cover that in a few minutes, but suffice it to say, we are exceeding expectations with this lean launch. But we don't have the resources that we need in order to really advance this product to patients, maximize the number of patients that can have access to AmiSurge, and ultimately to create maximal value for the company. So we are seeking a partner in parallel. So before I get into why AmiSurge is an awesome product with a great market opportunity, let's back up and talk about the science and technology behind AmiSurge. So the power behind AmiSurge is our proprietary nicotinamide platform, and NAM enables us to both expand the number of cells and, even more importantly, to enhance the intrinsic properties of these cells. So for AmiSurge, that means making the cells more STEMmy, if you will. So these stem cells need to home to the bone marrow, so improving their ability to do that and making them resilient against oxidative stress. So that sounds super easy, right? We've all faced these challenges, right? Super easy, just increase the number of cells and make them more resilient. No, I think all of us know, people have been working for 30 plus years on trying to make this happen. So really excited to be at the point at which we were able to bring AmiSurge to market. FDA approved in April, indicated for patients in need of an allogeneic stem cell transplant with hematologic malignancies. Again, another disclaimer. So as is true with any of the allogeneic stem cell transplants, AmiSurge comes with a boxed warning, the number of risks, including the risk of graft versus host disease and the potential for graft failure. Please see our complete prescribing information for more details. So we talked a little bit about the technology behind AmiSurge, which is our NAM platform, But the science and really the clinical strength behind OmniSurge was the fact it was approved. It is the first and only allogeneic stem cell transplant that has been approved on the basis of a phase 3 global randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial. And this phase 3 pivotal trial was conducted with over 100 patients. And one of the unique aspects about this trial was that 93% of the patients were racially or ethnically diverse, which is pretty challenging to achieve and pretty unusual for any therapeutic area. And you're going to hear more about how that's an area of a tremendous unmet need, so we're excited that we were able to bring that diversity into the trial. This product was approved on the basis of this trial, and there were two critical endpoints. One was the time to neutrophil engraftment, and the other endpoint was the reduction in the rate of infection. So these two endpoints are critical. OmniSurge delivered a more rapid time to neutrophil engraftment, highly statistically significant result with a 50% faster time to neutrophil engraftment, and a statistically significant reduction in both bacterial and fungal infections. So we were excited to have OmniSurge approved in April. We were also excited because on our day of approval, we not only had the FDA announcing approval, but we had an actual quote from Peter Marks in a press release by the FDA where he recognized that these endpoints were critical, a critical advancement in stem cell transplant, marking a critical innovation for patients suffering from life-threatening cancers. So that was pretty exciting to see, and it certainly makes us all feel good, right, as we're bringing these cell and gene therapies forward, that even our regulators are working with us to make a difference for patients. So I alluded to the fact that there is a tremendous unmet need, and that creates an opportunity for OmniSurge to make a difference. So let's go through some of those numbers. There are over 18,000 patients who are candidates for stem cell transplant, and based on the most recently published data by the CIBMTR, 8,000 patients in 2020 received a stem cell transplant. I think Tim had alluded to in his opening address of this meeting, it's probably about 10,000, that's a safe bet, at this point receiving an allogeneic stem cell transplant. But by our market research, we estimate that there are at least 1,700 patients who are eligible for a transplant but go untransplanted every year. And that's likely due to two factors. One, the ability to find a suitable and available donor, and number two, the time it takes to get to transplant. So we found this even as we've launched OmniSurge, that there are patients who unfortunately succumb to their disease before they're able to get to the transplant. So the time to delivering therapy is incredibly important. So you may be thinking, aren't there other transplant options? You know, certainly OmniSurge isn't the first transplant donor source available, and that's true. Before the introduction of OmniSurge, there have been 5 different types of transplant options for patients. Some of these are familial donor sources, and some are from unrelated donors, but there is still unmet need even with these multiple options on the table for these patients. Some of the limitations can be the time to transplant. There can be long wait periods, up to 6 months, but on average 2 to 3 months to wait for the transplant, waiting on your donor to be available and waiting to get into a transplant slot. Additionally, there can be the complications associated with the use of post-transplant cyclophosphamide, and where the transplanter is making a trade-off between some of the complications and toxicities that come with that. And then certainly there has been standard cord blood. OmniSurge is derived from cord blood cells. And while cord blood has many benefits in the sense of that lower, less stringent matching criteria, but simply there often are not enough cells, and there's a slow time to neutrophil engraftment, which leads to complications like an increased risk of infections. So these are some of the limitations or the aspects in which a transplanter has to make trade-offs evaluating any of these potential transplant types. One of the critical reasons why those at least 1,700 patients go transplanted every year is due to the disparities. Here you can see that according to the data from Be the Match, if you're an African American or Black patient, you have 29% like odds of finding a match in the registry, 29%, compared to a white or Caucasian patient at 79%. So we're hoping that OmniSurge has the potential to narrow this gap and really create more equity in terms of transplant for patients. Don't take our word for it, though. We estimate that there's at least 1,700 patients, but Dr. Stephen Devine, who is the Chief Medical Officer for NMDP Be the Match, spoke at a recent investor conference, and he said it could be much higher. there could be a 30 to 50% increase in the number of patients who are transplanted with a potentially suitable donor with new donor sources like OmniSurge. So that could be 3,000 or 5,000 patients. So in terms of what that translates to, how this unmet need translates into a tremendous market opportunity, we believe that OmniSurge has the potential to achieve 20% market share in about 5 years. And that 20% market share is going to come through increased access and improving outcomes. So on the increased access side, that is accessing those patients who currently are eligible and go untransplanted, the at least 1,700. The other half of this 20% is coming from the unmet needs in the market with available donor sources, or what you might think of as market share shifting. We also learned, even with our very lean launch, that a little bit of education goes a long way. OmniSurge is an educationally sensitive product, and we've seen that as we had our first launch with just the 4 account directors and the 4 MSLs out there educating transplant centers, and then we just recently brought on 4 additional account managers, that just the tremendous increase in the ability to educate transplant centers and get them onboarded. And as you know, for these therapies, it's not like a retail product. It's not like the FDA approves it, and then whether you're calling on accounts or calling on healthcare providers or not, they can still write the product, at the local Walgreens. In this case, the transplant center has to be onboarded. Luckily, OmniSurge doesn't have a REMS, but you still have to go through a process logistically, both have a clinical champion and an operations champion to get that transplant center onboarded in the first place before you can ever identify a patient and potentially get them on therapy. So we're excited. So now the moment you've been waiting for, how are we doing? Well, we're far exceeding our own expectations with what we could do with limited resources on an extremely lean launch. So on these 2 critical performance indicators or key metrics, transplant center onboarding, we set a goal of 10 to 15 by the end of the year. When I was making this slide for this meeting, we had 15. We're up to 16 onboarded transplant centers, so woohoo! And that's a full quarter ahead of what we expected. So we're really excited about what the team's been able to do on that metric. From a market access perspective, we set a goal of 70% of commercial lives covered, and we're at 90% of commercial lives, and all of the top 20 payers are covering OmniSurge. That's just tremendous. I've launched so many products, and I've never had this rate of market access, and we were able to secure full Medicare coverage and reimbursement within 90 days of approval. So this market access won't be the reason that a patient can't get OmniSurge. I'm also excited to say that just a couple of weeks ago, we announced that we had transplanted our first patient with OmniSurge, so with the commercial product, and we are accumulating more and more patients in Gamida Cell Assist. So that indicates that a transplanter intends to use OmniSurge as their donor source of choice. So a little bit about Gamida Cell Assist. So I mentioned that OmniSurge is the first pharmaceutical-grade sort of allogeneic stem cell transplant, and that's unique. But we're also unique in that we're the only allogeneic stem cell transplant with the power of OmniSurge behind us. So these are resources that we provide to the transplant center and to patients to help them work through and navigate the prior authorization process, the coverage and reimbursement landscape, any challenges that a patient may face in their journey to get into their transplant. And OmniSurge is supported by Gamida Cell Assist to ensure we can deliver the product within 30 days of receiving the starting cell material. So that's the commitment we make to patients and to transplant centers, that we can turn it around, not in 3 days, but in 30 days, which we know can really rapidly expedite the time to transplant, which we've heard through market research and working with our customers that time to transplant can be critical. So this is a quote from Dr. Usama Girgis at Jefferson University. Actually, this center was one of our first 2 onboarded transplant centers this year. And Dr. Girgis was talking at that investor event about how he had this patient. And this patient was a diverse patient, had limited donor options, and really had a critical time that he needed to get to transplant. And Dr. Girgis was reflecting on the fact that if OmniSurge had been available at that time, that he likely would have used OmniSurge for that patient. So that was a pretty moving testament to the potential. So in summary, We have OmniSurge now available on the market. We're excited about the potential and meaningful impact this advanced cell therapy can have for patients with hematologic malignancies. We believe that this is a great market opportunity. We're targeting just 70 transplant centers that make up 80% of the transplant, highly educationally sensitive, no competition in market or on the horizon, and we believe that that can generate 20% market share and about $600 million in peak revenue in just 5 years, fully resourced. And we're excited that we've had our first patient recently transplanted and have more and more patients accumulating in Gamida Cell Assist, which means that we can build this hope for a cure for even more patients with blood cancers. So thank you so much for your time.